Hello, everybody. We are going to spend some time today talking about a portion of credit and debt, but specifically, we're going to talk about financing college, something that is near and dear to many of us, because guess what? Most of us have to borrow some money in order to pay for college, university, trade school, or what have you. Let me start this out with some crazy statistics. You might have heard this before, but did you know that more students drop out of school because of financial trouble than academic trouble? Yeah. Did you also know how much the average student loan balance is for undergraduates that leaving school? Do you want to guess? Well, it's over $30,000. $30,000 is the average student loan balance when an undergraduate leaves school. And you know what? Usually that's in addition to about $10,000 in credit card debt on top of that. So it is really important for us to understand if you are going to borrow money for school, if you're going to finance college, university, trade school, whatever it is, you need to do it properly and really understand what you're getting yourself into. So let's take a look at some different loans. So I'm not going to spend time today talking about all the other ways to cover costs of college, although there's some really important ones. Maybe your family or your friend or your uncle or your aunt or your grandparent set money aside for you in a 529 college savings plan, like the Oregon College Savings Plan. Maybe you can go get some scholarships or some financial aid in other ways. What we're really going to focus on today is financing college. How do you cover the extra cost for college outside of what you can pay for out of pocket and through those other means? So let's understand loans. Let's look into this. So there's different types of loans. First, there's federal student loans, and a federal student loan is a loan funded by the federal government, and it helps you pay for your education. A federal student loan is borrowed money you must repay with interest. There's also private student loans, and that's a loan from a private lender like a bank or some other lending institution. Now, it could come from all sorts of factors, but we really need to focus on the different types of them. So let's look just a little bit about some of the most common federal student loans and other loans that are sets here. So first, let's just take at the federal student loans. Direct subsidized loans. These are terminologies you're going to hear soon. If not already, you should probably understand what it is. A direct subsidized loan are loans made to eligible undergraduate students. So undergraduate, this isn't for post or learning after you're a graduate. It's undergraduate. And it's those who demonstrate financial need to help cover the costs. So it's a needs-based. A direct unsubsidized loan are loans made to the same thing, eligible undergraduate, but also graduate and professional students. But in this case, the student does not need to have demonstrated needs, meaning it's not for those that might be a little bit more on the lower income side. It's for basically anybody that would qualify for that. A direct plus loan, specifically for parents, well, it's loans made for somebody that's either in a graduate or professional students and parents for undergraduate students. So still for undergraduate students, but it's a loan that the parent would be taking out to cover these expenses. And then a direct consolidated loan here on the far right-hand side, and it just allows you to combine all of your eligible federal loans into one single loan. All of these are terms that you're going to need to understand. We're not going into a ton of detail on them right now, but to really look at it and to see maybe you have a loan yourself or you're looking to get one, if you really want to understand what it is and dive deep into it, why don't you visit nslds.ed.gov. It's a great place for you to learn more about those types of loans. Now, let's dive into just the broad categories. Like I said before, there's federal, which is backed by the federal government, and there's private loans like banks and other lending institutions. So let's look at the differences between the two. So first off, a federal student loan, here's basically where it is. It's a U.S. Department of Education funds, or at least they insure it. You will not have to start repaying your federal student loans until you graduate or you leave school or you change your enrollment status. And if you change your enrollment status to less than half-time, that's when it would kick in. So you don't have to pay while you're still a student. The interest rate is fixed. It's often lower than private loans, and it's much lower than most credit cards. Undergraduate students with financial need will likely qualify for a subsidized loan, and this is where the government pays the interest while you're still in school, at least half the time. The government's covering that interest while you're there. Most federal loans, except for the PLUS loans that we just mentioned, do not require a credit check or a report. Basically, if you're somebody who doesn't have any credit and you haven't built a credit score or credit report, that's okay. These federal student loans can help you establish a good credit history. You also won't need a cosigner. You don't need a family member or somebody else to cosign with you. Interest could be tax deductible. We're not going to get into too much detail with this, except for the fact is that's an extra tax benefit from it. I'm not saying to go get out a loan just for that, but it'll help if you have to have one. They can be consolidated into, like I said, one of those direct consolidated loans. And at times, if you are having trouble repaying a federal student loan, you may be eligible for temporary postponement or even to lower those payments. It's called forbearance or deferment. There's a lot of support when it comes to the federal student loans. A little less when it comes to the private student loans. Private loans, for instance, these loans are private companies, banks, credit unions, other agencies, or maybe even a school themselves. Many private student loans require payments while you're still in school. So you took the loan out maybe your freshman year. You actually have to start paying on that right away. Not all of them, but many. You can have variable interest rates and some can get really high. We've even seen some greater than 18% interest. That is really high, really high. They're not subsidized. So the interest while you're in school, even if you're not having to pay it while you're in school, is still accruing. It's still counting against you. You may actually require an established credit report, and the cost will depend on how good your credit score is. Again, these are private loans, so these companies are taking risk with you, and they need to make sure that they're covered. You may need a cosigner. The interest is usually not tax deductible, and you cannot consolidate them into a direct consolidation loan. So although you may actually need to utilize federal and private loans, I guess what we're saying here, if you can start with the federal, there's a lot more protection, a lot more support that's built around them. Now, we just talked about different aspects of loans. There's a lot more information you can go to really understand them. In fact, if you really want some good advice and it's free, there is a phone number you can call specifically on the federal, and it's 1-800-4-FED AID. So it's 1-800-4, the number 4, FED-AID. It's a good place to go and start getting some information. There's also some great information all within your own state that you can take a look at that has some good information on student loans. Take a look at it. So before you even get to that point, before you even take out that loan, what's a good rule of thumb for how much student debt you should actually carry on? Well, that's really up to you. Some of you may not want to have any debt. Some of you might be okay with it. It's a little bit hard to grasp, but a good rule of thumb, a good ROI, return on investment rule of thumb is you shouldn't take out more total student loan debt than what your first year's salary will be in the job that you're looking for. And again, this is going to be different. Some people are going to school to become a doctor. Some might be going to a trade school to become a welder or a business, etc. You need to take that into consideration. In fact, how much debt will you have when you leave school? Well, there's some good resources for that. Why don't you do your best to understand what you're actually going to school for? So before you start taking out that student loan debt and seeing how much you're putting aside, find out what your salary might be. There's some great websites out there. I would suggest just going to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So you could just Google that, Bureau of Labor and Statistics. There's the URL also at the bottom of this screen here. But basically, you can choose the state you plan to live in, you choose the desired occupation, and you can see actually the salary averages in all of those areas. The example here is for a social worker position. So if I'm looking to become a social worker, maybe in the state of Oregon, I'm not sure exactly which state this one it was chosen from, I can expect that I'm probably going to be making somewhere between $30,000 to maybe $50,000 my first year. But if I was planning on this for my debt that I was going to take out on school, I'd focus on the lower end, the $30,000 to maybe $40,000, which means I don't want to get to that level. I want to stay under 30 to 40,000 in my student loan debt. It's just a good rule of thumb. I'm not saying that this is something you have to do, but it's a good rule of thumb. Well, this also comes into play with how much the school is actually going to cost. So it's a little surprising and a little strange, but it's the truth. There's the sticker price for how much the school's going to cost, and then there's actually a net price. You rarely, if ever, are going to pay the sticker price, whether it's a state school or a private university, especially with the private universities. You're not going to be paying the sticker price. This is the price that they list on their website if you go there. You most always are paying much less than this. So for instance, an average resident cost for an in-state school here in Oregon, it might be University of Oregon or Oregon State University, it's around $24,000, $25,000 for residents. For those that don't live here, maybe who's coming from Idaho or Nevada, they're going to be looking at about $43,000 or $44,000. Now, the net price actually takes into consideration all of the supports that are going to be provided to you. The schools themselves might give you some grants and scholarships, the state, the federal, etc. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can see that, yeah, you might be sitting there with the $24,000 price that'll cover tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, and other expenses. So that's the total amount you expect. But look, you're good chance you might get some federal grants or also some state grants. And also the colleges themselves will provide you some. So then you're going to see a reduction in that and you're looking at a lower cost. In this case, in this example, instead of paying the $24,000, you're paying closer to $14,000. It's good to take a look at this. There's plenty of great calculators out there. In fact, each university and school that you're looking at should have a net price calculator built in as well. So how do you calculate your student loan payments? Well, this is complicated, but again, there's some great resources out there. If you do decide that you need to borrow a certain amount and you figured it out that amount is $30,000 or $40,000, or like in this example, it's $56,808. It's a very specific number. You can use some of these great calculators to be able to gauge how this is going to affect you. So the loan balance is that amount. The interest rate, you can choose one. 6%, 7% is probably realistic right now. Loan terms, you get to choose. You can do your research on this, but this one is good, 10 years. Some of them are more, so just know. Minimum payments, some of this will be auto-populated in there, but in this scenario, they calculate it out and you can see that, well, with this, my minimum payment is going to be about $50, but my total years in college is for the average debt per year is going to work out to actually where the monthly loan payment is going to really be $653. And you have 120 of those payments because it's 10 years. 12 years times 10, it works out to where your cumulative payment is about $78,500. So not only are you paying back the $56,800, but with the interest, you're paying back another $20,000 of interest basically that makes that full amount. I know that's staggering numbers, but it's important to know it. Don't sign a loan document or a student loan document without understanding this. The loan officer should walk through this with you, but you can also use calculators like this one found at Finaid, F-I-N, aid.org, and do the research yourself. The moral of the story today is make sure you truly understand what you're getting yourself into before you sign any of these student loans. They're important, but you need to know. Thank you so much.